I never imagined it would come to this, that my own daughter, my Ava, would go so far just to erase me from her life. It wasn't just the wedding. It was everything. Years of tension, of resentment, of battles I didn't even know I was fighting until it was too late. I funded her dream day only to find out I wasn't invited. No explanations, no remorse, just a cold, calculated betrayal. And when I confronted her, she looked me in the eye and made it clear. I didn't belong there. But she forgot one thing. That wedding, it was happening on my dime. And if she thought she could push me out and still have everything she wanted, well, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. I should have seen it coming. The moment I heard whispers about my daughter's wedding plans, something felt off. At first, I brushed it aside, maybe just nerves. But when I reached out to the wedding planner, expecting to go over the final details, I was met with an uncomfortable silence. Then a carefully worded response. "Sir, I'm afraid you're not on the guest list." Not on the guest list? I was paying for the entire event. Confused, I pushed further, but the truth hit me like a freight train. Ava had explicitly instructed them to keep me out. No explanations, no apologies, just erased, like I never mattered. I told myself there had to be a mistake. Maybe miscommunication, a mix-up. I called Ava, but my messages went unanswered. Desperate for clarity, I went straight to the source, the wedding organizer. What I heard next sent a chill down my spine. "Sir, Ava was very clear. Under no circumstances are you allowed at the venue." It wasn't just a mistake, it was intentional. She had planned every detail, right down to making sure I wouldn't step foot near her big day. And yet my money was still good enough to fund the entire thing, the sheer audacity. I was livid, but more than that, I was hurt. I spent hours replaying every memory, searching for an answer. Had I been that terrible of a father? Did she truly resent me this much? But no matter how I twisted it, the reality remained the same. I was an outsider in my own daughter's life. And the worst part? She didn't even have the decency to tell me herself. It was a power move, cold, calculated, and deliberate. But if she thought I would just sit back and take it, she was wrong. She wanted a wedding without her father? Fine. But she was about to learn what that truly meant. I didn't waste time. If Ava wanted me out, she'd have to say it to my face. But when I finally got through to her, she was colder than I expected. No hesitation. No guilt. Just pure, unshaken confidence in her decision. "You don't belong there," she said, flatly, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I waited for an explanation, something, anything, to justify this level of cruelty. Instead, she doubled down. Not only was I banned, but she had also instructed security to remove me if I dared to show up. Security, as if I were some kind of intruder, as if I were nothing. I tried to keep my voice steady, but the anger clawed its way up. "Ava, I paid for this wedding." Her response? A shrug, a bitter little laugh. "And I don't owe you anything." It was the way she said it, so dismissive, so final that nearly knocked the air out of me. This wasn't just a fight. This was a statement, a declaration that I no longer had a place in her life. And the worst part? She didn't care, not one bit. Mercy, my wife, tried to step in, hoping to reason with her, but Ava's hostility only flared. "Stay out of this!" she snapped. "You're not my mother." That was the last straw. She wasn't just pushing me away, she was burning the bridge while looking me dead in the eye. For years, I had fought to be in her life, to mend the broken pieces of our relationship. And for what? To be tossed aside the second it suited her? No, if she wanted me gone, she would get exactly what she asked for. She thought she held all the power. She thought she could humiliate me and still walk down that aisle in her dream wedding, but she was about to learn a hard lesson. I sat with that conversation longer than I should have, replaying every word, every icy stare. I kept telling myself to let it go, to be the bigger person, but the truth? I was done being walked over. She wanted me out of her wedding? Fine. Then she could figure out how to pay for it too. With one call, I shut everything down. The venue, the catering, the flowers, every last detail I had funded. Sure, I'd lose some money, but at least I wouldn't be paying for my own humiliation. If Ava thought she could erase me and still enjoy the wedding of her dreams, she was about to get a brutal reality check. I half expected a call, an angry message, some sign that she'd realized what she had done. But there was nothing. Silence. She really believed she could move forward without me, as if I were just a forgotten receipt in the back of a drawer. But what she didn't realize was that I wasn't just anyone. I was the reason that wedding was even happening. And now there was no wedding. I pictured the moment she'd find out, her perfect world crumbling around her, the weight of her choices finally settling in. Was it petty? Maybe. But this wasn't about revenge. This was about respect. And I refused to be disrespected any longer. As the days passed, whispers of the cancellation spread. Family members called, some to scold me, others to quietly agree, but I didn't care. I had done what needed to be done. Ava thought she could cut me out of her life and still take from me. She was wrong, and on what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, she was about to understand just how wrong she truly was. The morning of the wedding arrived, but instead of joy and celebration, there was chaos. Vendors showed up at the venue only to be turned away. The florists, the decorators, the caterers, all left standing outside, confused and angry. Calls flooded in, desperate attempts to salvage the day, but there was nothing to salvage. The contracts were void, the payments had stopped, the venue was locked. And Ava? Ava was nowhere near ready to accept the reality of what was happening. She arrived in her gown, expecting to walk into her fairy tale, only to be met with locked doors and a very firm "you don't have permission to enter." The security guards didn't care about her dress or her tears. Rules were rules. She lost it. Full meltdown. The kind where logic no longer exists, just pure, unfiltered rage. She screamed, argued, even tried pushing past security, but they were professionals, unmoved by her tantrum. A crowd gathered, guests whispering in hushed tones, watching as the bride, the one who had planned this whole thing so meticulously, was now on the outside looking in. A single call could have fixed all of this. A single ounce of humility, an apology, even a shred of regret. But Ava had made her decision. And now she was paying for it. When she refused to back down, things escalated. Security threatened to call the police for trespassing on what was supposed to be her big day. Her fiancé, Matt, tried to calm her down, but by then, the damage was done. The wedding wasn't just postponed, it was over. Completely. And the worst part? The guests knew, the family knew, everyone knew exactly why this was happening. Not because of some logistical error or bad luck, but because of her. Because she had pushed too far, burned too many bridges, And now, instead of saying, "I do," in front of her loved ones, she was standing in a parking lot, watching the dream she had so desperately tried to control slip right through her fingers. This wasn't new, not even close. Ava and I had been at war for years. Ever since she was a teenager, she treated me less like a father and more like an enemy, someone to fight, to defy, to punish. I tried to be patient, to understand. Divorce is hard on kids. Remarriage, even harder. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. The day I married Mercy, Ava made it clear. I had chosen the wrong side. She wasn't just distant, she was hostile. Passive-aggressive comments turned into full-blown fights, doors slammed, calls ignored. And when she wasn't pushing me away, she was testing every boundary she could find. Her teenage years were a nightmare. Bad friends, bad choices. There were nights I'd get calls from the police, others from schools, warning me about her behavior. And the worst part? She didn't care. Not about the consequences, not about how much it hurt me to watch her spiral. I tried everything. Therapy, discipline, space. But nothing worked. She wasn't looking for help. She was looking for control. And when she realized I wasn't giving in, she lashed out in every way she could. The wedding was just the final blow in a long list of betrayals, a list that had started years before I even realized what was happening. Looking back, I wonder if there was ever a moment when I could have changed things, fixed what was broken between us. But then I remember the way she looked at me outside that wedding venue, like I was nothing. No regret, no remorse, just rage. Ava had made her choice a long time ago. And now she was finally seeing what that choice really meant. But this wasn't just about the past anymore. This was about what came next. Because after everything, after all the chances and forgiveness I had offered, I wasn't sure I had any left to give. At first, my parents, Ava's grandparents, were horrified. "How could you do this to your own daughter?" they demanded, voices thick with disappointment. To them, I was the villain, the heartless father who had humiliated his own child on her wedding day. And honestly, I let them believe it. I didn't defend myself, didn't argue. What was the point? Ava had always been good at playing the victim. She'd call them sobbing, twisting the story just enough to make me seem cruel. And for a while, they bought it. But life has a funny way of revealing the truth. It didn't take long before Ava's mask started slipping. The same entitlement, the same venom she had aimed at me for years, she turned it on them. My mother called me one evening, her voice quieter than usual. "She's not the same little girl we remember," she admitted. Ava had snapped at them over something small, something so insignificant that even they couldn't excuse it. Slowly, reality set in. I wasn't the problem. I never had been. They had just been lucky enough to see a version of Ava that no longer existed. And now, they were seeing what I had seen for years. So, one by one, they pulled away. Calls became shorter. Visits became rare. My parents, her biggest supporters, stopped making excuses for her. And me, I stopped trying altogether. No more reaching out. No more hoping she'd change. For the first time in years, I accepted the truth. Ava had made it clear she didn't want me in her life. And maybe, just maybe, it was time I stopped wanting to be in hers. But as I stepped away, someone else was about to step in. Someone who would learn, in the hardest way possible, exactly who Ava really was. Ava eventually got married, though. It was nothing like the grand event she had envisioned. No designer dress, no extravagant venue, no hundreds of guests marveling at her perfect day. Instead, she settled for something small, private. Just a handful of people, no family, no fuss. It wasn't the dream wedding she had fought so hard to have. It was a compromise. And for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I reminded myself this was her doing. She had burned every bridge, cut out the people who cared the most. Now she was standing in the ashes, pretending it didn't bother her. At first, things seemed fine. She posted pictures, smiling beside Matt, her new husband, as if nothing had ever gone wrong. But if there's one thing I knew about Ava, it's that the cracks always show eventually. And sure enough, they did. It started subtly. Little hints. In her social media posts, small complaints disguised as jokes. Then the real issues surfaced. Whispers reached me through mutual friends, the fights, the manipulation, the way she treated Matt like an accessory rather than a partner. And then, one day, I got the call I never expected. Not from Ava, from Matt. His voice was heavy, drained. "I'm leaving her," he said. No build-up, no hesitation, just the cold, hard truth. She had pushed him too far, just like she had pushed everyone else. The controlling behavior, the emotional outbursts, the never-ending cycle of blame, it had finally caught up with her. And for the first time, someone who wasn't me had walked away. But unlike me, Matt wasn't just leaving a toxic relationship. He was about to hand me something I hadn't had in years, an explanation. And with it, the final piece of the puzzle that was my daughter. Matt wasn't just calling to vent. He needed help, my help. "I know you don't owe her anything," he admitted, voice strained, "but I think something's really wrong with her." He wasn't talking about the usual drama, the entitlement, the selfishness. This was different. He told me about the mood swings, the paranoia, the way she would lash out over the smallest things and then act like nothing had happened. He had tried everything, patience, reasoning, even therapy. But Ava refused to admit there was a problem. And now, standing at the end of their broken marriage, he was desperate. "Maybe she'll listen to you," he said. I almost laughed at the irony. Ava had spent years shutting me out. Now, I was supposed to be her lifeline? I told him I'd try, not for Ava's sake, but because I needed to know. I needed to understand what had gone so terribly wrong between us. So I reached out and, shockingly, she answered. But the moment I started talking about therapy, about getting real help, her walls shot up. "I don't need fixing," she snapped. "I'm not the problem, everyone else is." There. It was, the same blame, the same deflection. But there was something else. Something I hadn't noticed before. A crack in the armor. A hesitation. A flicker of doubt so fast I almost missed it. Maybe, just maybe, some part of her knew Matt was right. But instead of acknowledging it, she did what she always did. She turned on me. The insults came fast, vicious. "You just want to control me. You've always wanted to control me." It was pointless. No matter what I said, no matter how much I tried to reason with her, Ava wasn't ready to face the truth. So I made a decision. One last effort, one last attempt to get through to her. But if I couldn't, then I was done. For good. I knew Ava wouldn't listen to me. She never had. But maybe, just maybe, she'd listen to someone else. That's when I thought of Lauren. Once upon a time, Ava and Lauren had been inseparable, best friends who shared everything. But like most people in Ava's life, Lauren had eventually walked away, tired of the constant drama. Still, if anyone could get through to her, it was Lauren. So I reached out, explained everything, and asked if she'd be willing to try. To my surprise, she didn't hesitate. "She won't make this easy," she warned me. I knew that. But at this point, I had nothing left to lose. Lauren reached out to Ava, and at first, it went exactly how I expected. Denial, anger, the usual defensive walls. But then something shifted. Maybe it was the history they shared, the familiarity of an old friend who knew who she used to be. Or maybe it was the exhaustion of losing yet another person. Whatever it was, Ava actually listened. And for the first time, she agreed to therapy. I should have felt relieved, maybe even hopeful, but instead, all I felt was numb. I had fought for so long, tried so hard, and in the end, it wasn't me who got through to her. It was Lauren. Still, I told myself it didn't matter how it happened, only that it did. Ava was finally getting help. But deep down, I knew this wasn't some fairy tale ending. Therapy wasn't a magic fix, and Ava had spent years convincing herself that she was never the problem. Maybe she'd change. Maybe she wouldn't. But as I watched from a distance, something inside me shifted. For the first time in years, I realized that my life didn't have to revolve around saving her. And as much as I wanted her to heal, I also knew that I couldn't keep waiting for it. Ava went to therapy. She stuck with it longer than I expected. Long enough for people to start asking me if things were better between us. If she had changed, if we had finally made peace. But the truth? No. She still blamed me for everything. Still saw me as the villain in her story. Therapy gave her words for it, terms like childhood trauma and emotional neglect, but the end result was the same. She wasn't ready to take responsibility for the mess she had made of her own life. And honestly, I stopped waiting for her, too. At some point, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. Anger takes effort, energy, and I had spent enough of both chasing after a relationship that Ava had never truly wanted. So, I let go. I stopped checking in, stopped waiting for an apology that would never come. I moved on. Not in the dramatic, slamming the door kind of way, just quietly. The same way you stop wearing a shirt that no longer fits. I wished her, well, genuinely. I wanted her to be happy, but I no longer needed to be part of the story she told herself. People ask if I regret cancelling the wedding, if I would do things differently now. And the answer is simple, no. That day was never about a wedding. It was about a pattern, a lifetime of taking, of pushing, of expecting me to just endure it. And for the first time I didn't. I set a boundary. And once I did, I realized something I should have known all along. I wasn't the problem. I never was. And now I finally get to live like it.
Keep watching our stories by clicking on one of the videos that appear on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to be alerted about new videos. See you next time.